We're going to get started here in just a couple minutes. Welcome to today's workshop. Today we're talking about join logic and granularity as far as SQL goes. Today's workshop is going to be like a lot of kind of hands-on looking at how SQL works together, and I have some sample data we're going to look at together. It's going to be really fun, and I'm really excited to get started. So the sun is shining here in Portland, Oregon, but if you're joining us, I'd love to know where you're joining us from. If you want to hop over to the chat and let us know who you are and where you're joining us from. Today, like I said, I'm here in Portland, Oregon at our headquarters. We're in like the in-between phase with decorations. You can see we still have our sunflower swag, but also some pumpkins. So we're definitely in that like space where summer's kind of coming to an end and we're still in a little bit of denial, and also fall is coming. So I am drinking a fun pumpkin-y thing. So hey guys, nice to see you all. We have some folks here from Seattle, Virginia, Port Orchard. Yeah, it's good to see everybody. Klamath Falls. Aw, nice to see you guys. I was just, I've been traveling a lot this month. So I was just in Pennsylvania and it was beautiful there too. And next week I'm going to be in Wichita, Kansas. So it's been kind of fun to be here in Portland and see fall happening here. And then I'll be gone and come back and even more fall will have happened. So yeah. If you're just joining us, I was just asking folks to go over to the chat, let us know where you're joining us from. We'll get started. We'll give everybody one extra minute because I know everybody is always kind of scrambling between meetings in this era of Zoom. So we'll start in one more minute. But yeah, let us know where you're joining us from. We're really excited to get started. I'm going to go ahead and at least get my slides shared here. Let's see how this goes. There we go. Okay. Just kind of get our slides queued up. There we go. So you guys should be seeing my slides now. If you're just joining us, please hop over to the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. We have some slides today, and then we're going to also be working a little bit directly in SQL together. So it'll be kind of a fun combo of some conversation about how joins work and also some live like practicing with some sample data that I have ready for us today. So it's going to be fun. I'm so glad you're all here. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to today's webinar. I'm kind of thinking of this one more as like a workshop where we're talking about join logic and granularity and about avoiding SQL headaches. I'm Ginger Bandeen. I'll skip to the next slide here so you can see my little intro. I'm the founder and CEO here at Mission Driven Data. I'm a social worker, so when I talk about data, I sometimes use the right terms and sometimes just use the terms I've invented in my head to talk about it. So, I've been working with EHR data for like 15 or 20 years, depending on how you count. But a lot of that knowledge I kind of gained through writing reports for electronic health records and also from learning from people who were kind enough to answer the million questions that I had. So if you're someone who maybe doesn't think of yourself as a person who can write SQL, or you're a clinician, or you're still kind of dipping your toes in the water with SQL, I was right there with you, and it's fun to get started. And hopefully today's class will be kind of like paced well so that you can kind of follow along, but also like don't panic if you don't get everything all at once. It's sort of like exposure therapy. Like you get exposed to SQL a few times and it starts to make more sense each time. So a few housekeeping things. We always record these sessions, so today's session is no different. We're gonna record today's session. We love it when people ask questions as we go. I have team members here with me who will be kind of helping me keep track of the chat. So if you have a question and I don't answer it right away, please be assured I'll get to it soon. And we also always try to email out materials. So definitely we'll send out the slides afterward. And like I said, we're going to record this. You'll be able to get the recording in the community. If you're not already a member of the community, our team will put a link in the chat so you can join. All of our recordings end up there. So there's getting the recording, getting the slides, and then since today we're going to also play around a little bit with some SQL code, we'll probably put together a little handout that we'll send out too with kind of the snippets that we go through together. So yeah, we just want you to be able to relax and kind of follow along and not feel panicky about taking a million notes. So So today, you're in the right place if you are new to writing SQL. Like there are some other sessions in our community that you're also welcome to check out. Like there's like SQL 101 and SQL 102. But if you haven't had a chance to do that yet, that's okay. We are, this is being recorded, so just kind of pick up on what you can. And it's okay if everything doesn't make sense yet. I think a lot about writing SQL is imagining what you are going to want out of the SQL. And so that is a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. So I think this will still work, even if you haven't had a chance to like really do a lot of SQL yet. If you're a frequent SQL writer, I think it never hurts to hear someone else talk about their thought process. I get a lot out of that myself when I'm listening to how other people on our team write SQL, or even people who are out there who in different agencies we work with who are writing their own SQL. So you're very welcome today too. If you're just curious about SQL and you're like, well, I've never even seen it, I don't even know what it looks like, you're going to get to see some today. So that's great if you're here. And if you just work with folks who write SQL and maybe you supervise them or you try to support them, it's also great if you're here because it's good to kind of know maybe when you're requesting a report or requesting a change to a report or you notice something broken with the report. Sometimes it's nice to know like where to start or what you might explore first for solutions. So you're also welcome here. And by the way, this pretty picture is from my recent trip to the East Coast. This was like the place at my college where I used to take my social work classes. So had to say that. There's a lot of pictures from my East Coast trip in our slides today. So okay, so here's our agenda today. We're going to talk first about SQL joins, which are a thing you can certainly Google and get information about. I'm going to try to do it from a perspective of tables you might use in the credible EHR or in basically any EHR, kind of common tables you might be playing around with and how those might join together and the kind of results you would get based on how you've joined those tables together. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to think about level of granularity when you're building reports. So I'll explain more about what I mean by that. But yeah, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about troubleshooting things when you do have duplicate data, and we're going to have time for questions. So that's kind of our agenda for today. Just a quick reminder, mission-driven data. If you're new here, we offer opportunities like this for learning as part of our free online community. Again, the link is in the chat. We have some cool sessions coming up, so please join. We also have consulting, and we have a tool called Janet that helps you get your data out of Credible so that you can write SQL queries against it. So that's just a quick little thing. Okay, I always like to start off with a poll. So I'm just gonna ask you guys if you wouldn't mind answering a few questions. I know sometimes people are like literally driving a car. Please do not have an accident trying to answer these questions. But if you are somewhere where you can answer a question, I would love to know, how long have you been using SQL? Like, are you brand new? Have you been doing it forever? What do you usually use SQL for? And what are some of the things you struggle with? So there's lots of options there. And if you don't see an answer that meets something that you could think of, you're welcome to put that in the chat as well. Sometimes it's just nice to know like who else here today, and it really helps for me thinking about like what I want to make sure I talk about. So thanks everybody for answering the poll. In case you're wondering, there are other people here who've never used SQL. There's quite a few of you, so congrats, welcome. This is going to be so fun. Yeah, it looks like we also have some folks here who've been doing it for a while. Oh, that's funny. I just realized there's something called choice 3 in the options. Sorry about that, guys. No one is choosing choice 3. Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Okay, and then what you usually use SQL for looks like pulling totals or counts for reports is a big one. Some people are using it for exploring data before you visualize it, sometimes feeding Power BI or other dashboards. Some people here are still learning and not sure how they're going to use it yet. Some people are using it for cleaning or debugging data. And then in terms of the last question, which things people struggle with the most? Looks like quite a few people answered keeping track of all the logic was a big one. And the runners up are joining tables without duplicating data, knowing where to start, and testing queries as I go. Then lots of people also answered understanding why a query breaks, handling missing or empty values, figuring out what to count, making time to test queries properly. So yeah, lots of fun feedback. Thanks, you guys. It's so helpful to know like what you guys are doing and who else here. So we have a big mix of people. So just wanted to reiterate that if you have a question as we're going through, please don't hesitate to put it in the chat and I'll answer it as best I can. We do have some folks here with a lot of experience, but we have lots of people here who don't have a lot of experience. So you don't have to be embarrassed. Every question is a good question. So thanks everybody for filling out the poll. So let's start off talking about SQL joins. I always find kind of Venn diagrams to be the easiest way to think about SQL joins. So I think about, so a join is something that tells a query what combination of data you want to see. So usually that is in the section of a query called the from section. So you would say from a particular table or a table that is then joined to another table. And there's a couple different kinds of joins. There's more than a couple, but the two I almost always use are a left join or an inner join. So a left join means that, and I'm going to kind of, oh, you know what I'm going to use? Like, I think I'm going to try using the pen because I think that will help. We'll see how this goes. Isn't it fun to test things in real life? So a left join means that you take everything from the table on the first table you list and then look to see if there might be anything in the, oh yeah, the highlighter doesn't work. Okay, I'm not going to use the highlighter. Sorry guys. I was trying to be so fancy. So never mind. Well, still want the, anyway, it's fine. Don't worry. Okay. Sorry, let me start again. So a left join means you take everything from table 1 and then look to see if there is anything in table 2. So a really good example of this is when you're combining clients and client visits. So let's say you need something. Oh, try a different color for the pen. Thanks, Larry. I will. Let's try it. Let's try. I think it's just too. Well. Okay, let's try it. Can you guys? No, it just. Oh, there it went. Okay, sorry. It kind of worked. We'll see how this goes. Okay. So if we were making a left join between clients and client visit, that would mean we take everything from the client table and anything we might find in the client visit table. The thing about clients and client visits is when you kind of combine those two tables into an actual Venn diagram, it would actually look a little bit like this one on, I think the problem is that I keep losing my cursor. It would look a little bit like this one on the right-hand side, where basically, at least in the Credible database, you can't really have a client visit without a client, but you can have a client without a client visit. So in this example, your client table is bigger and could have more clients than the number of clients who would overlap with the client visit table. But some tables connect in a different way where, like another example of tables would be employees, so these 3 tables are what are involved in combining to find out what clients are assigned to what employees. Because an employee can have more than one client and a client can have more than one employee. In the Credible database, at least, they use kind of I think of it as like a helper table called employee clients that stores all the different combos of employees and clients. And the way those tables kind of work is more like this, where employees can be related to the employee client table, but not all employees have clients and not all clients have employees. And then you still got your client visits that are kind of within, maybe if I use I'm gonna try just one more idea. Ooh, this is a little better. Okay. I can kind of point better. So, then the client visits kind of fit within the client table because you can't have a client visit that doesn't have a client. But it's when you think about this in your head too much, then you realize, but wait, client visits can have employees. And then sometimes does anyone ever have that moment where you're like, oh, that breaks my brain, where you're like, wait, there's also a link here. So we're going to talk about that in some more detail in SQL And Corey, thanks for bringing up, there is such a thing as a many-to-many join. That is a great thing to know about. Sometimes people call that a full outer join. There is technically also a thing called a right join. I personally have had very few instances where I needed to use either a right join or a full outer join, but there are some circumstances. So a good example would be this employee clients thing, where if you wanted all employees, even if they don't have a client, and all clients, even if they don't have an employee, then you could do a full outer join. And I might even show that. I might queue that. I have some examples queued up, and maybe we'll try that out in SQL and see how that works so you guys can get a sense of that. So speaking of which, now I kind of want to jump over and show you guys some stuff in SQL, because I think some of this stuff is easier to understand once you start actually seeing how it works. So let me share a different screen. Hang on one sec while I rearrange things. Okay, yeah, everybody hang on 1 second. Let me just move some things around so I can see y'all. Okay, I'm gonna share this screen. Okay, first thing first is this is all sample data. I have figured out that ChatGPT can make you a great sample data set because you can just tell it to create fake names. It saves me so much time because I don't know if any of y'all have ever had to make a sample data set, but the hardest part is coming up with fake names. And ChatGPT will just give you a list of 100 random names. It's so great. But if there is by some chance somebody's actual name in here, it's completely random. Like I just created a sample data with ChatGPT. So okay, so let's start off with that first combination of tables I was talking about. So that's combining the clients table and the client visit table. So the way I've combined them here first is using a left join. So what I'm saying here is take everything in the clients table and then look to see if there is something in the client visit table for that, for any of those clients. And then to kind of give us an idea of what results we're getting back, I'm just counting client IDs. So I'm just going to run this little bit of code. And it's going to tell us that if we just count clients, like every row in that table, we get 519 records. So that's because, so just to give you an example of an unduplicated, because so you might have noticed I did a count of client ID and I labeled that duplicated. And that's because if you want to count unique clients, you actually need to add this word distinct to your query. So I'm just going to run the distinct count of clients now. Okay, so there's 200 clients in this list when I use a left join to client visit. But let's say I did an inner join to client visit instead, then there's only 181. So the difference is that there's about 19 clients in my sample data who don't have a client visit. And if I'm using a left join, the cool thing is I still get to see them all. They're still all in my data set. But if I use an inner join, it eliminates any clients. It's kind of, okay, this is how I visualize it. I visualize an inner join like it's almost like this rule is like locking down the other thing. It's like forcing a rule backwards. So in this case, it's just saying, find me everything in clients, and then I'm just like casually interested in whether or not any of those clients have a client visit. But here it's like, show me all the clients, but wait, there's another rule. Only show me the clients if they have a client visit. So I don't know if you're someone who thinks visually or like little stories. I obviously like love personifying everything or anthropomorphizing everything, but in my opinion, an inner join is real. It's like handcuffs on both sides of the equation. It's like, nope, you got to be in both places or we aren't counting you. Whereas a left join is just like casual, like, hey, I don't know, would you like to do you maybe have some client visits? So since Corey brought up the great idea of doing a full outer join, let's just do that next, just so you can see. I don't know that we'll get interesting results about this one, but we'll just, because I think my data set, everybody, let's see. I'm just gonna make this list full outer join. Because I don't think in this data, well, we'll find out. Did I make any client visits that don't have, yeah, there aren't any client visits that don't have There aren't any client visits that don't have clients. Kind of like because I was saying that thing about usually you have to have a client for there to be a client visit, right? The exception to that would be if you were writing a more complicated query where you said like only show me clients who have an open program in this program, but then and then also look for people who have a certain type of visit. Theoretically, then you're kind of limiting clients more than one way. So then you could have like a visit that doesn't get pulled into your data set because the client in that example didn't meet the criteria to get pulled in. So it's like still kind of, it's another way to write a query. But okay, so that didn't really give us like cool full outer join vibes, but we're gonna do it again with employees and clients and we'll get cooler results. Yes, Corey, that's true. That would be all clients and all client visits. A full outer join would give you, if this was an example where you could have, let's say we were doing, what's a good example? Something you wouldn't have to have in a client visit. I think if I go down to the employee example, it'll be a good example. So yeah, let me come back to that question, Corey, because I think it'll make more sense when we talk about clients and employees. So clients and employees are related because of like caseloads, right? Or like people being assigned to a client. So in the Credible database, the way that works is you can either start with employees or clients, but you basically would, in this example, I started from clients and I said, okay, show me all the clients and then look to see if they have a relationship to an employee and then look to see what employee that relationship is with. And I'm going to skip the duplicated count because I think, well, I'll show the duplicated count because there'd be a lot, right? So this is 343, which is all the combos of clients and employees that exist, including ones where there's a client but no employee. That is what that is doing. Unduplicated count is just going to show you your same 200 clients. Now, if you made those inner joins instead of left joins, now this is like, you know how I was talking about that rule? It kind of like forces the rule backwards. So what this is coming up with less people because it's saying, up here you were just like casually like, hey clients, and let's see if they have employee clients and if they have employees. But here you're saying only show me clients if they have an employee client record and only show me those records if they have an employee record. So it's kind of like, it's like forcing the logic to be all three of these things. They have to be in all three to count here. Let's do that thing now with the full outer join because I think this will be, so this is like forcing all the rules. And then this one we're gonna do full outer join. And we're gonna say unduplicate count. Oh, but we have to count employees too, because that is gonna give us a better, because what it's gonna show us now is employees that don't have clients. I need a comma. Don't you love it? Writing SQL live because you can make mistakes and everyone can see you make mistakes. Let's put that same count in here so we can see how it compares. Okay, so let's go through here and starting back up here where everything was left joined. We had 200 clients and 50 employees. Here where we're inner join, we have 157 and still 50 employees. I'm wondering if my data set is going to give us anything interesting. We'll see. Here we go. Yeah, I think the way I built my data set, all of the employees have a relationship to a client. So that's, but in real life, if you're writing a query against a real data set, not everybody would have, right? There'd be employees in there that don't have caseloads. Yeah, so, okay. But I do want to explain what a full outer join I'm going to show that slide for a sec again, because I think, so a full outer join, I only think I'm going to do that because I'm just going to show you guys this screen. Hold on. It won't be as cute, but remember how I was showing you this screen? A full outer join means all of the information from inside any of the circles. That's a full outer join, meaning you don't just get the overlaps, you get like everybody in the whole shebang, like the whole Olympic symbol. So that's what a full outer join does. A left join means everything from one baby and anything else that you can get that overlaps with that baby. And an inner join, it's bad. It's not represented perfectly here because if you did inner join to both of these, it would actually be the center of the triangle. So yeah. I'm trying to give you lots of different ways of hearing the same information. So if it seems like I'm repeating myself, it's kind of intentional because I feel like it's one of those concepts that it really helps to hear more than one time and hear in different ways. So yeah. So and then I know like I've focused on left joins. Technically, you can also do something called a right join, which is just a left join, but you put the tables in reverse order and go right. So there, in my opinion, this is just ginger banding coding. I have usually found it easier for my brain to just stick with left joins. And if for some reason I feel like I want to make a right join, I just put it back in the order I need it to be so I can still make a left join. But there are sometimes like rare circumstances where you would need to do a right join. But like I said, I think in the course of my time doing code, I don't know if I've used it more than once or twice with like probably like thousands of lines of code at this stage of my career. So usually you can just know what a left join does, and you can just know what an inner join does. And then if you want to get real fancy someday, you could do a full outer join. Um, and then the right join would be like, I'm trying to think of like if I was going to make a chart of how often you'd need to use that, maybe full outer join would be like, from 5 minutes to midnight. And then right joins would, for me, be like 2 minutes. So, yeah, mostly I use left joins and inner joins. Um, Okay, so we talked about these tables and how they relate with joins. Um, left joins, we talked about left joins, we talked about. Okay, I want to show you one way where you can kind of get sideways on a query because of how you joined things. So let's do one like this, where you're like, someone comes to you and they're like, okay, I need a list of all the everybody, all our clients. And I want to know like who their primary provider is, and I want to know like how many services they had. And so you start building a query and like, okay, I know I want to start with clients. I want to left join to client visit. And guys, I always put these little letters after the tables because it's easier so I don't have to keep retyping the names of things. That's all that is it's called an alias is the fancy name for it. And it just means like C, then I can just type C dot and it like guesses or it knows I mean the client table. And CV dot means the client visit table. So those two are going to combine together based on if there's a client ID in clients that matches the client ID in client visit, it's going to pull those client visits in. And then I'd be tempted to go like employee clients. Oops. Oops. And then this is the one where I bet once in a while you've tried doing this. And then you're like, but I want the employee from the client visit too, right? So you're like, oh, do I not have emp ID in client visit? I must not put it in there. But theoretically, if you were using Credible, you would have like an employee ID. And then so I don't know if you noticed, but what I did when I brought in the employee table a second time, because employees also might link to client visits, I just gave it a different alias. If you're not someone who likes to use aliases, you're going to have to if you want the same table twice in the same query. So it's just a little tip. Yeah. Okay. But even with this query, so right, so like say you were doing this, you're like, cool, I've got my 3 things I need, and then I want like the client ID, and I want like the client name, and then I want like the visit type, and let's say the rev time in, which is just the service date, and then I want like the first and last name of their employee. Okay, let's like run this query. well, and I'm gonna, just to make it easier for us to see what's going on, I'm gonna put an order by in, and I'm gonna do client ID and the date of service, and let's see what we get. Let's run that. Okay, so this is like a super common, I've seen this kind of query happen so many times. This is why I chose to show these tables actually. Oh yeah, self-join. Sorry, Corey. You can totally yes, that's another thing. Yes. Okay. For the purposes of today, I'm trying to kind of write out code in a way that is more easy to understand for people who are learning, but there's always tricks, and Corey's mentioning some things that are true too. But okay, let me talk about this. So I feel like almost everyone who's ever written a query has had this happen where you're like, oh, I now have 2 rows. Like now I'm going to count this twice for every person because there are 2 providers for this person. So because this client has 2 providers, now I have 2 services in this table every time I pulled this query. Does it kind of make sense? It's kind of like branching logic. So it's like I said clients, and then I said visits, and then I said also show me their providers. And this is true and credible, very often people have more than one provider assigned. And so that does often make it so that you get a duplicate record. So this is one of the things I really wanted to highlight in today's training, honestly, is this problem. So if you have a situation where you're trying to pull clients and visits and employees, you're going to have to figure out a way to handle the multiple employees problem, or you're going to have to figure out a way to summarize that data in Power BI or in whatever visual tool you're going to use so that your user doesn't have to mess around with like figuring out why there are 2 of everything. So there's a few ways to do that. And that kind of brings us to our granularity part of the conversation. Because if what you really want is to count services, you could include a service ID and you could find a unique count of service IDs. If you're going to want to be able to show all the primary people in your report, then you might choose to keep it like this and just make a drop down where they can just choose people by primary provider. Sometimes you can limit how many extra providers you get by just looking at primary or assigned case manager, but both of those can sometimes be duplicated. I know one of them is you're not supposed to be able to duplicate one of them, but I'm pretty sure they both can be if you do things in certain ways. So, but I just wanted to point out, like, because it's so common for people to run a report and get results like this and be so frustrated that this has to do with, it's like SQL is just it's just doing what you told it to do. It's just, you still need to think through one more step here about, okay, but I'm going to now have 2 rows for every person. Is that what I meant to do? Can I handle that over in whatever visual tool I'm using? Or do I want to say, oh, that's right. Like in this example, we assign Larry to everybody, but I don't really care about Larry. I really just want to see who else besides Larry is assigned. So I'm going to do that one first, just for this little example of this. Again, all names are fake. James Lee. It's very interesting the fake names ChatGPT comes up with. So we won't think too much about that. But okay, so let's say that was the thing where I was like, oh, I see what happened. Like, say you have like an outreach worker that gets assigned to every client, but you don't really need that person. You really just want to see the other person. So if I was going to try to do that, I would maybe do something like change my left join here. And I might say like E dot last name not equal to Rasmussen. Now let's see what happens then. Cool. So that's cool. Did you guys see what happened? I love this. So see how even though now I'm not finding his name, it's still pulling in 2 rows. Do you guys, I bet you might have a guess why. Well, it's because here I left join out to employee clients. And even though now I said, well, don't bring in employees if it's Rasmussen, it's still bringing in a record from the employee clients table because it's like, well, you didn't tell me to stop anything here. So there's a couple ways you could handle that. If you knew Rasmussen's employee ID, so we could add that to our query just to figure out what it is. Actually, I'm going to cheat because I know it's not going to find anything if I do employees, but it should still be in the employee client table. Let's try that. All right, so Rasmussen's ID is 1679. And e.emp ID not equal to, we're going to see if I do this right. Isn't this fun? O-E-C. There. So do you guys kind of see how I had to like work the logic backwards? Like I had to think about like, okay, why am I still getting duplicate rows? And it's because there was still a layer here where I was not limiting it to anything. Hey, small side note, if you ever work in Oracle SQL, this trick won't work where you add more things to your left join. There's this weird thing in Oracle SQL where if you start adding rules to your left joins, it turns it into an inner join. So if you write reports against care logic, for example, you have to be careful about that. You can't actually do that here. But as you can see, you can do that here because it didn't make an inner join because we still have Jeff Kennedy here who doesn't have any employees and he didn't like not show up because of me making these rules. It didn't like turn that into an inner join because if it did, we wouldn't have any of these empty rows. It would have just gotten rid of Jeff Kennedy because he didn't have an employee. Um, yeah, okay. So that is a really common kind of thing to have happen. Um, And one way to handle that is with what I just did, which is like to eliminate something. But often it's like real that people have multiple employee client relationships, right? That's very common. So the other way to handle that, there is the option to create something called a subquery where you pull that data in at a different point in your report so that you don't start duplicating things. Or another alternative is to bring in your client visit ID to your query, which will then end up over in your data set. And then the nice thing about that, and actually while we're doing this, I'm going to take off this rule so we still see our little duplicate guys again. Oops. Okay. Okay, so we're back to having our little duplicates, but now there's a client visit ID. And what's super helpful about that is if in your report you're eventually going to do, you want to count up services, now you can count unique services even though it's got 2 rows in it. So sometimes it's not really a problem for there to be 2 rows for every record in a query, as long as you have something unique you can count. So often that'll be like the client visit ID or client ID, or once in a while you actually have to create like a unique record to count because maybe you want some combination of like employee, like only count like employees that did services for this client and how many different employees did services per client or something like that. So sometimes you can create a sort of a fakey thing to count unique records. Again, that kind of carries over to our discussion about granularity. So I just have a couple slides I wanted to show you guys about that. So hang on one sec. I'm gonna switch views, get my slides back up. Thanks for being patient. I appreciate you guys. Okay, let's talk about granularity. And I just want to real quick, again, just set. Oh, thank you. Olivia asked, what program am I using to write your code? Thank you for that question, Olivia. It is SQL Management Studio, but I will say that people on my team use use Visual Studio, Microsoft Visual Studio. Can someone? I think that's what everybody else uses. I'm old school, so there's a newer thing you can use to write code, but I'm using SQL Management Studio. Yeah. Sorry, I never. There's like 7 things that are called Visual something in Microsoft, but it's so I'm sorry, I don't remember. We'll put it in the handouts, guys. I just don't remember the name. I'm worried I'm going to get the name wrong. So, okay. All right, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Oh, Visual Studio Code. Thanks, Corey. Yep, that's probably what it was called. Thanks, Eli. Thanks, guys. Yes, Visual Studio Code. I'm always worried I'm going to say it wrong because there's something else called Visual Basic, Visual something else. Anyway, yeah, I always forget what it's called, but it is better. It's better than SQL. I'm just so used to SQL. I'm a creature of habit. So don't be like me. Do better, guys. But all the things I'm showing you with code work just the same no matter what code system you're using. But there are some cool things with Visual Studio Code where you can like sort columns once you've run the query. That's a cool thing I've noticed. You can search through columns. It has more features. So, yeah. Okay, so thinking about granularity. So this kind of goes along with that idea about duplicate records because I think sometimes when we're joining things, like I said, I think we get kind of worried that we're going to get duplicate records. And I think one of the things to remember is that it can be okay to have duplicate records as long as you have a way to count or add up or summarize the things you want to see within that duplicate set. So kind of like the example I showed where I brought in like the visit ID, like it doesn't really matter that I had so many rows as long as I have something I can count to add up over in my visual layer. So granularity is this idea that, and I call it this, and I mean, I'm sure I didn't invent this idea, but whenever I'm being asked to make a report, there's kind of like two parts to thinking it through. There's like, what are the kind of summarizations people are going to want off of this report? And then there is, what kind of detail are they going to wish they had behind those summarizations? And I think this is like a really important duality. Because it's really easy, not easy, it's very common to make reports that summarize things where then people don't have a way to see the details behind the thing that was summarized. And I think, like, historically, that's been a way that reports have kind of gotten sideways in organizations because, you know, you guys have probably all seen like where there's like a PowerPoint slide with like a chart on it and it says our productivity is 35%. And everybody is just like, what? You know, like, who did you count and what services count as productivity? And, you know, did you accidentally count people who were here part-time? And did you remember that we were closed for Christmas last week? And like, what about the snowstorm, right? All those things. And that is kind of a problem that happens when the report you've made or the way you've presented that data was just the summary level and didn't have the detail level even like accessible for people to see. So I'm a big fan of combining those two things together. So when you think about building a report, thinking about the summary you're going to give and the detail behind it that you're going to need to have. And so that's why even when I was showing you guys that example of like that big left join thing, like I don't know that it's a bad idea. I think in lots of cases it's a good idea to have both those rows for each of those providers in your report, but then make it easy for people to limit it to just their own services or their own caseload and have a way to summarize things for the whole group. So like be able to count unique client IDs or unique client visit IDs. So I just wanted to say those, and this is again, something we'll include in our handout, but I think it's really good to kind of ask yourself these questions when you're like sitting down to start writing code or to start working on a report, which is like, what do you want to summarize in your report? Are you going to count something? Are you going to sum literally something like add up? Are you going to look for the first or last date something happened? Like a good example of that would be like, when was the last treatment plan done for this person? How long has it been since their last service? How far in the future is their next appointment? Those are like things that are kind of summarized. And then what level of detail do you want to be able to show? So once you've summarized those things, do you need to be able to give people more detail? So a great example would be like, when was the last treatment plan done for a client? Odds are people really will want more than just the date, right? Like they're probably going to also want to know like, oh, who did that service? You know, and did it get approved? And what program was it done in? And things like that. So thinking about the other detail you're going to want to include. And even more than that, like, is it possible people are going to want to look at the last of something or the next of something, but they're actually then going to like come back and be like, well, when was the one before that? Or when was the one after that? So I think these are kind of basic questions, but I think if you start off before, you know, as you're sitting down to try to write some code, having this be kind of a picture in your mind really helps. Because if you're building a data set where you want to be able to show this level of detail, then you would start out building out the details, but each detail you would add, you would be thinking about how that's going to affect your totals. So if you were going to also include, and in that example of those queries we were running a minute ago, if for every service, you also wanted to be able to show when a person's next appointment was, that would be possible in there, but you just need to keep in mind it's going to repeat that same next appointment for every service because people would only have theoretically like one upcoming very next appointment. So as long as that's okay with you, you can do that. But I think personally, I think this is the question you kind of have to have figured out as you start building a query, because if you're not thinking about it, it's really easy to accidentally do like something called a max for, let's say for date. Like you could do max date of treatment plan to get like the most recent treatment plan something was done. But if you also are going to want to know who did that treatment plan and what program it was in, doing max isn't going to work as well for that. In that case, you're going to want to actually build yourself a little data set about that last treatment plan. The trick we usually use for that would be like using maybe a row number to get the most recent of those details so that you can pull them in. Whew, those were lots of words, guys. How's everybody holding up out there? I think this is it's like a little bit hard to conceptualize, so I wanted to show you guys a demonstration of this one too. So let's switch back to SQL. I know we're kind of getting close to the end, but we can do it. We can do it, guys. It's going to be okay. And let me just see if I missed any more questions. Okay, didn't miss any questions. Oops. Stand by, stand by. I'm just moving things around. Someday I'll have 4 screens so I can move everything without having to take a sec, guys. Any day now. Hold on. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Share. Cool. Okay. Okay, guys. So I started this query before we started because I didn't want us to run out of time. But I wanted to show you this trick where a trick that we use a lot is called row number. And a row number just assigns a row. So what I want to do before I'm commenting out this row. By the way, if you ever see 2 little lines in front of a row, or the other way you can comment something out is not something I'm going to remember to do right the first time. Yeah, like a slash and a star. Oh, and then you have to close it with a star and a slash. That just means that this green thing is going to be ignored by SQL now. So I just did that so we can look at one row number at a time. So let's look at a row number. So all this query is doing right now is it's starting from client visits and left joining to clients, which if you guys have been, if you're still with me, you'll probably think to yourself, well, it wouldn't have to be a left join because there aren't any clients, or there aren't any client visits that wouldn't have a client. So whether it's a left join or an inner join, it's kind of going to work the same. But that was just a trick in case you guys noticed that. But anyway, let's run this query. So I was just looking at services with a certain program, and I put it in order by client and then the date of service. And then I added this thing called a row number. So a row number just it's exactly what it sounds like. It's just counting every row, and it's doing it in an order you tell it to do. So what I've told this row number to do is to start over again for every client ID and count rows in order based on the day of service ascending, meaning the very first service will have a 1 and the next service will have a 2. So anytime I'm using a row number, I almost always will test that as I go because it's really easy to get that mixed up. So here's what it looks like. And let me just eyeball this. Okay, so for Ann Moon, I see a 1 and a 2. There's individual therapy and discharge plan. And the first one, the row number 1 is February 3rd. The row number 2 is June 16th, 17th. Cool, that looks right. So right now I am looking at, if I was just gonna look at the rows that are row number 1, I would see the first service for Ann Moon. Let me check Caitlin Terry. Let's see, here's 1 and 2. And this was on 2/19. This is on 9/19. Okay, there we go. Cool. And you'd want to make sure that it really is starting over for each client. So I'm kind of eyeballing it. It looks right to me. So that's how adding the row number works. Then when you want to just see that first service, the cool thing is you already have all this other detail about every service. But if I just want to see the details for every first service for a client, the way I do that, there's more than one way, but I'm just going to show you how I do it. I'm just going to say select everything from that thing I just did. Doop, doop, doop. I'm just tabbing over, nothing fancy. I do know I do know it's going to be mad because you can't have an order by in there. So I'm going to take that part out for this second. And then you just give this whole thing you just created like a name. That's why there's little red squiggly. So I would say like all rows, because right now that whole thing is all the rows. And then I just whoop, 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 whoop. All rows, dot row number equals 1. And all that's doing is saying, okay, take everything I just said, all that stuff I have that's in this query right here, but now I want from that whole thing only the ones where the row number is 1. So let's keep an eye on Ann Moon and see if that works right. She should keep her one from February 3rd. Let's see. There's Ann Moon. There's February 3rd. Cool. So now all of these are row 1 for that service. So now if I wanted to bring this information in to another query where I had stuff for every client, it's not going to create a separate row for every service. It's just going to show that first service that they got. But let's say you wanted to do the opposite. You wanted to show the last service they got. Basically, it's the same exact idea. I had it here as a second thing, but the only difference is here where you're saying order it by the date of service ascending. Instead, you're going to order it by the date of service descending. So let's keep an eye on Ann Moon. 2-3 should go away and her other service should show up instead. Let's see. There it is. There's her last service. So now this is showing the last service anybody got based on whatever criteria I had. So that's one trick to like think about your granularity level, and you could apply this same idea to lots of things, right? Like next appointment or last treatment plan. You could do, if you want to know one more little trick, you can do something called a date diff to get the days since a service. So date diff, day, CV rep, time in, get date is just the tricky way. Oops. Okay, let me explain what this is. This is just saying find the number of days between the date of service, and get date just means today. So how many days ago did these services happen? And then you've got that number right there. Look, you got a little bonus thing, guys. So, okay, so we talked, so thinking about granularity again, now if I had a report where I was going to have a row for every client, I could just bring in this information about their last service in the SUD program and how many days it's been. And you could even include like a link to that service because hyperlinks are possible if you're doing like Power BI. But okay, that was the little thing I wanted to show about granularity. You guys might have noticed, I feel like if this was like a class, someone like me, honestly, would raise their hand and say, but you didn't include something to count. So I'm going to go ahead and include unique client visit IDs just because that's always a good idea. But in this example, there's only going to be one client visit ID per person because we're only showing the last service that they got. But it never hurts to have a client visit ID. I would say in general, if given the choice, it's always good to have that there because maybe then you're going to also have like the first service, the last treatment plan, the last outreach. Then you kind of have a way to like figure out what service you're on. Okay, guys, we covered a lot. Hang on there. I want to get some feedback from you guys on this. So hang on. So don't leave. Hang on. I got some questions for you. And I want to give you guys some time to ask questions too. So stand by. If you have a question, please go ahead and put it in the chat. I'm going to get my slides back up so I can get that going. Thanks, everybody. Oops, I can do it. Here we go. Cool. All right, let me get the questions pulled up. Okay. All right, guys. We are trying, I don't know if you've noticed, because you might not be on all of our mailing lists, but we are really trying to do sort of a series of these, I would call them like little mini trainings to kind of step-by-step help people get more familiar with SQL and Power BI. I know we touched on some things today that were pretty advanced and we went kind of fast. That's why we record these. We want these to be a resource for you in the future, and we'll send out all this code and everything. But I'd really love your feedback about like, which of these things would you like a deeper dive on? Because again, this is for you guys. We're really trying to support agencies that are trying to build out their sort of internal teams. So that's you all. So let us know which of these things would be, a good next deep dive. Cool. Thanks, guys. This is so helpful. So helpful. So yeah, what else would you like a demo of? Do you have a suggestion? Oh yeah, this is like a little long answer question. I know it's sometimes hard to answer in the moment. So if you can't think of an idea right this second, but if you've been sitting here being like, well, this is all great, but I really wish they would show me how to solve this problem, please put the answer because, or even just something in general, like, I wish I knew how this worked, or I wish I knew why this problem keeps happening or something like that. Because we'd be happy to kind of do some more, I don't know, bespoke kind of demos of things. Um, so yeah, thanks everybody for filling out the poll. It's super helpful. We really take all of this. I mean, most of the ideas for our webinars come from like asking you guys what you would like. So it's super helpful. Looks like everybody wouldn't mind a little bit more on subqueries and row numbers, which doesn't surprise me because I kind of threw that in at the end there. And I know that's a lot to absorb. Texting and fixing things when things don't work all of a sudden. Yeah, I have some ideas for how we could kind of walk through that together. Dealing with missing data for sure. We can do some stuff with that. Building code from scratch. I am curious, and you guys feel free to put this in the chat. Like, is there an interest? This is something I've been thinking about. Like, sometimes it's hard to cover a lot in like a 1 hour webinar. If you are someone who's like trying to really get familiar with SQL, is like a 2 hour like intensive SQL thing something you'd be into? Like, if you feel more comfortable like emailing me later, let me know. But like I've thought about like could a small group do like a 2 hour, like kind of a little more informal, a little more time for questions. Um, I see that, okay, it sounds like there is some interest in that because like it wouldn't I think that might be a fun thing to do. So it's cool to know you guys are into that. Okay, I've been thinking about that. I also just want to do a plug for co-working. I know some people come every time, and that's awesome. But that is also a place where you can just show up and have like questions. And I try to walk through any answers. And you usually learn something from the other people who show up too, because everybody has different things, but they overlap. So yeah. Okay, guys, thanks everybody for filling out the poll. I'm going to end the poll, but feel free to keep throwing thoughts in the chat too. Okay, I just wanted to remind you that we have been doing a lot of like statewide credible user groups lately. So if that's something you'd like to see in your state, we are very happy to like sponsor that and show up and help you organize it. We did one in Oregon and Washington. We've done that in the past in Minnesota. We're hosting a big group in Kansas, but that's not really a user group. We're just having a fun dinner for everybody. So, but if you would like us to come out to your neighborhood and you work with a user group that would like some help organizing that, let us know. We would like to support that. Coming up in the community, in October, we're going to have this great guest speaker talking about person-centered care, Ariel Singer. She's actually someone who was a speaker at the National Council Conference. I've known her for a long time. She's kind of like my LinkedIn friend, and she's really great and has lots of ideas about kind of the intersection of all of the data we have to track now and how to make that more person-centered. She does a lot of stuff around like person-centered screening and how to make that process better for clients. And I'm really excited because of all the stuff everyone's doing with CCBHCs. I think she's just going to be right up everybody's alley. I think it's going to be great. And then we also have this really cool, if you are a financial person, I highly recommend our upcoming financial data webinar. This is Catherine Kennedy has been kind enough to offer to do this with us. She's the CFO at Morrison Child and Family Services. And they have been doing some really advanced financial reporting. And we're going to have her help us explain how you could use those reports. And they're all reports you can get with Janet. So I think it's going to be really helpful. So I really encourage everybody to come to that too. I think Katie's been on it and she's posting in the chat the links to those. We'll also include the links to register in like our follow-up email. So hey, if you're out there and you wish you could give a presentation like this, that's really fun, or this is actually something I really want to say. If you've been at a conference lately and you heard a great speaker, will you let us know? Part of what I try to do when I'm at conferences is find people that are doing cool things, but I can't go to every session. So if you went to a conference lately and you heard a speaker or you heard a webinar, please let us know. We would like to feature more speakers. Just another plug for the community. If you're not already in there, please join. We have lots of good resources in there. And of course, I always have to mention Janet. We are having so many people use Janet now. I just figured out yesterday we're over 70 people now, 70 agencies, which is pretty cool. Just to remind you all, our mission is to make all this data more accessible to all of you. That's why we do sessions like this. We want to change the world and we want you guys to help us, or we all want to change the world together. Let's do it. So these times especially, we want to empower you guys to have what you need, and we want to cultivate your creativity so we can be the catalyst for change. And here's my contact info, guys. I really appreciate everybody coming today. Thanks to my team for helping supporting me with this. I just appreciate people showing up and being open to learning. I know this was a lot. I know I talk fast. I know it can be kind of intimidating to look at code, but I just want to reassure you that, like, even if today you were sort of like, I got a little bit lost, don't panic. Like, some of this is a little bit of like exposure therapy, right? So in exposure therapy, you like see something and then you see a picture of the something, and then you kind of work your way up to being able to do it. So if you didn't leave today necessarily knowing how you would do everything, it's okay if you just got a little bit more familiar with some of the terminology. So, and I would encourage you, if today was your first taste of SQL, checking out the SQL 101 and 102 would be a really good idea, because I do start very, very basic. Like I say, like, this is SQL Management Studio. This is what all this stuff is. This is the stuff you don't need to worry about and all that stuff. So feel free to check that out. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. It was wonderful to see you all. Please reach out if you have questions, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. All right. Take care out there. All right. Bye, everybody.